Now, 4:06, I call this committee meeting of the Audit Committee to order. President of the Chambers is myself, Mr. Cummings, Mrs. Weems, Mr. Davenport, and then we have our auditor, Karen Whitson, and Sarah Branch, as well. Our attorney is present. I'll let you guys. Are you guys speaking today, or should I leave you out? All right. Let's see here. First thing is to adopt the agenda. I ask for a motion to adopt the agenda as published.
Make a motion.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, the agenda is adopted. All right, first thing on the agenda is to approve the minutes from the April 9th, 2025 meeting of the Audit Committee.
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Hang on, I take some notes here. Send my one. Okay. Now I'll turn it over to Ms. Whitson to discuss completed reports.
Thank you. I'd like to start by reminding you all that each of the completed reports are on the approved 2025 work plan. I'll review highlights from each audit and then we'll answer any questions at the conclusion of each report. Beginning with the change in bookkeeper school activity funds audit for Salem High School. This audit was performed due to the resignation of the bookkeeper, and we did the audit for the period of July 1st, 2024 through March 31st, 2025. She resigned in the middle of March. We concluded that the cash balances were fairly stated, that there was compliance with certain policies and procedures tested on a sample basis, and key internal controls examined were performing as designed. There were 5 exceptions noted related to cash disbursements. The principal and the Department of School Leadership accepted the recommendations for improvement. The financial statement is presented in the appendix. Are there any questions on the change in bookkeeper school activity funds audit for Salem High School?
Okay. Sounds like nobody has any questions. I just thought I'd summarize here in kind of plain language. It looked like it was and there was what appeared to me to be fairly minor discrepancies here.
Yes.
So I would say this is a very positive report
Yes.
for the outgoing bookkeeper at Salem.
It's a positive audit, and it gives the new bookkeeper a clean cutoff,
Excellent.
which is very important. So.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you.
Okay, the next audit is the capitalized assets audit. The purpose of this audit was to evaluate VBCPS's process to account for and report assets above 5,000. The audit period for the period of audit was 2024 and 2025 school year through the middle of June. The objective of the audit was to determine if VBCPS is following its procedures to record and reconcile its capital assets annually. Our overall conclusion is that VBCPS has procedures in place to record and reconcile capital assets. However, the Office of Business Services is not using the information to remove inventory items that are no longer in service. In addition, we were able to verify the existence of all judgmentally selected assets with the exception of 2 technology items. Management accepted our recommendations to update guidance on the asset disposal process and for the Office of Business Services to work with the proper points of contact in each office, department, or school to reconcile the items that are no longer in service. Finally, during our test work, we learned of several pieces of food services equipment which had been stored in a custodial closet that was not being used. We met with food services, who was happy to put the 3 found assets into service. The Office of Business Services will work with the contractor that we hire to inventory assets to identify other items such as this that the division has already purchased but is not using. We recommend that the Office of Business Services perform capitalized inventory spot checks. We believe that there is much to be gained from on-site observations at a frequency to be determined by the Office of Business Services. Are there any questions on capitalized assets audit.
I've got a question. Is there a regular program of auditing where assets are, making sure that the assets are where they should be?
As far as inventorying, yes. Auditing from my office, no. As far as inventorying, we hire a contractor that does an annual inventory of all assets that are tagged, which includes controllable, which are under the 5,000, and then capital, which are above 5,000. He does that inventory each year. The Department of Technology does their own inventory. The vehicle inventory is done every several years because the Office of Business Services keeps the titles of those vehicles in their office. We did select vehicles, though, during this audit to take a look at that process, and we were able to find all 25 that we looked at.
Okay.
Maybe for perspective, how many vehicles do we have?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. What do you think roughly? Is that 10% of it? Good. 400.
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe, or less, or, I mean, not including are you including buses?
Not necessarily. They're probably in a different category, right? So no.
Buses are seven.
They're all in one place in my brain.
There you go. All right. That's good. I just needed a rough number. So 400, 25 out of 400. Okay. Anything else, Larry?
Well, I'll give a tangible example of why it's important to know where your assets are.
Oh,
I was involved with an organization here in southeastern Virginia that had a lot of big trucks and even more trailers. And one day we got a call from the West Virginia State Police asking us if we knew if one of our trailers was parked on a lot across the street from a trucking firm there. So we had the person who was responsible for that part of our operation had no idea the trailer was even missing. We didn't know how long it had been there, but finally the state police called us. And we had to drive all the way to West Virginia to retrieve it, so.
and I misspoke earlier, I said 25, we looked at 45 vehicles, and we were able to find all of those vehicles, and I'm happy to obtain the number of non-bus fleet vehicles and send it to you all.
So 400 is our working number. So if it's anything significantly different than that, let us
Okay,
know.
perfect.
We can be official about this. Mr. Davenport, are you done? Anything else? Okay. Yeah, Ms. Weems.
Yes, on finding number 3, the outdated contact list.
Yes.
So basically, the recommendation and the response is to do exactly what we're doing. So we're requesting an updated site contact, and evidently we haven't been getting it. And so how are we gonna make sure,
So
we're gonna update it, but then we're gonna request it?
So our recommendation is that the list be updated to ensure that the contacts are correct. Because as part of the previous recommendation, we are suggesting that the Office of Business Services set up a process to go over the assets that are no longer in service. And right now, the list that they're using is outdated. We have people on the list that no longer work for us. So it's important when they're setting up that process that they get that contact list up to date so that the information is going out to the right people.
Right, so it's up to date, but, so a memo is sent each year requesting that up to date. So have we just not been getting that? And then, I don't understand. So we're requesting an updated site contact person list. We found out that some of the people don't even
It's
work
right.
here, and now we're gonna request the same thing after we update it. But how are we gonna make sure that we actually get it in?
Well, see, I think what had happened previously was a memo went out, and we didn't get responses from many of the people that should have been responding to say, hey, this person
Right.
has moved on to another location. So when we were doing the walkthrough, we noticed that list that they were using was outdated. So in order to make sure that it goes to the right people, they need to go ahead and scrub that list when they're setting up this new process to clean up the asset listing. I don't know, am I answering your question?
I mean, I understand that, but in the past, you've sent out memos saying, update, let me know when your people leave or whatever, and it hasn't been done. So now we're gonna try to do the same thing, but try to get it in.
We were trying to give them, the reason we put the spring comment in there is because we were trying to give them credit that they had already started the process because this audit was underway. And so that's why we put the sentence in there that we noted that the last memo was sent out in the spring of 2024. So they took the recommendation as we were doing the work with them, because we started this much earlier on, and went ahead and sent that out to start the process, because they knew, based on our discussion, that we were going to be recommending that they put a process in place, which would involve having the proper contacts.
Okay, thank you.
My only question is just from page 6 with the inventory spot checks, you know, with a plan being developed by March 31st, 2026. Is that something that is going to be reported back to audit committee, or is there a cadence that we'll be getting information about, or is it just a new process that's going to be going?
One of our responsibilities is to do follow-up on each recommendation. So our office will be following up at the end of March to see what's going on as far as the process and see if it's been completed. We, at times, have come back to the audit committee or asked management to come back and give an update, and that is certainly something that you can request. But I can also provide that information.
Okay. No, I was just kind of curious about how that was getting implemented and what the report back was, and if you needed me to go on my school visits when I'm reading to kids to take my audit, my little list with me.
We just felt like when we were doing the walkthrough, we did Kellam High School, and the Office of Business Services joined us for the walkthrough. They learned a lot from that process, and they hadn't normally done that. So that's why we are recommending that they do that annually, and to determine how many sites that they feel are feasible.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that.
Thank you.
I might kind of repeat some of the things that were previously said, because I'm not sure I understand.
Okay.
I guess I'll start by summarizing, like I did last time, that this is a pretty bad report, with the exception of vehicles. Vehicles, you were 100% in terms of finding what was supposed to be there and having it properly recorded. It seemed like the vast majority of the rest of it was not properly recorded or not in the right place. So pretty much every error you could have, an item that is properly in the inventory but not where it's supposed to be, an item that's present but not in the inventory. And I don't know if did you look for things you didn't find? That may be the one thing I didn't see in here.
Did we look for things that we didn't find?
Yeah, things that were on the record but were not present.
Well, there's a large amount of those, which is why we are saying in here they're not cleaning up the things that are not reported. So
Okay.
we have, for example, on that list, there's some cafeteria items that are necessary to be utilized in order to feed kids. So I'm pretty sure that they're there. There's just a problem with that verification piece.
Okay.
There are also maybe assets that are not there. So kind of going back to your comment on it's overall not a good audit, I will say that from the positive standpoint, that the Office of Business Services does a great job of making sure that the assets that we purchase each year are placed into service. They do a reconciliation from the financial system to the asset system, and then our contractor physically tags those items, scans them into, using a scanner into a system which we upload to our fixed asset system. So that process is airtight. We could trace that. We took a sample of items and we were able to trace those through without exception.
Okay.
But what's lacking is the back end piece. After the contractor does all the work and we verify the items that are on site and we have the list, what we need to then be doing is going to the department and saying, do you have that piece of cafeteria equipment? Where is that printer? What happened to it? Did it walk? Did it die and you just forgot to tell us? So that piece needs to be tightened.
Okay. So in other words, you feel like from know what to call it, from a management perspective, the program's working pretty well, but from the consumer, if you will, the school level, maybe there's a lack of understanding on how they're supposed to interface with it.
Yes, I feel like that's just been an area that hasn't been addressed, and so I think that this audit highlights that.
Okay.
And the great news is we have the information. It's gonna be kind of a once and done cleanup for them and for Office of Business Services, working with the contractor and all the departments and schools and offices. But once that one-time cleanup is done, I think they will have a very good starting point. And they'll be able to do that starting now, because they've received the June 30, 2025 inventory.
Okay,
So-
there are various number of dates in here. Is it the end of this year that we're looking to have that done?
The first recommendation, was, I'm finding number one, they're gonna do the coordination by the end of December. So it'll be in this school year.
Okay.
So we're gonna locate all of the assets that we couldn't find. And that will give us a starting point. Are we comfortable that going forward, say 2 or 3 years from now, that we're gonna be on top of the assets where they are?
If
And-
management follows the recommendation, which is to, at the end of every, when we talk to the contractor and we talk to business services, the plan is they're gonna kind of try and look at it in pieces going forward. So when he finishes all the cafeteria inventory audits, they can look at cafeteria and see what's missing. When they finish custodial, they can look at custodial, instead of it being one huge pot. So I believe, yes, that once this process is set up, they do the cleanup, and then annually they make sure, at least annually, they're confirming it. But their plan in business services is to do it more than just annually, to take it as he finishes those areas.
Well, I would recommend that the audit committee, maybe 2 or 3 years from now, circle back,
Okay,
do
sure.
this audit again,
Okay.
and just see where we are.
And we can also, I mean, if you all would like, give business services some time, and then maybe we can ask management to come back and provide an update. Because, you know, right now, they are crunching to get through the ACFR, financials. So, I think it would be helpful if, you know, maybe next spring, maybe they could give us an update on where they are.
Also important to note, this is a lot on the departments. I guess it's also important to know this has a lot to do with all the departments. I mean, we don't know what all the assets are in business services. We're gonna have to coordinate with all the departments to get this going and make sure everything gets straight.
Okay, I think all four of us are essentially making a similar comment, which is, you've asked for corrections to the contact list, you've asked corrections to the asset list. And we all kind of seem to be sharing a concern that we need to be able to look back here at some
Sure.
point in time and see that there's actually corrective action.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is effective. Because I was gonna basically say that, the same thing that Mr. Davenport just said. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I would just say that it's been my experience that this is an area that governmental agencies in general have probably issues with. Everything is done perfectly when you acquire an asset, but once you bring it on board and you start using it, things get borrowed from one area to another and never come back, and it's just hard to keep track of that stuff. But I used the example of one of our trailers ended up in West Virginia. We never did business in West Virginia. How did it get there? We have a strong suspicion how it got there, but it's just important to know where your assets are and to be routinely checking them. When I was in the military, we had IG inspections, and the IGs would come by and they would look at every asset you had. Do you have everything you're supposed to have? And just as importantly, do you have things you shouldn't have? And if you do, where did you get them? So if you're spending a lot of money on these things, you need to keep track of them.
That actually dovetails into my last point. So you had said that, that we have a contractor that does an audit,
He does an inventory.
an inventory, sorry, that's what I
Yes.
meant.
He scans, he barcodes and scans all of our controllable and capital assets.
So he's going from school to school to school, looking for every asset that's on his inventory?
Yes.
Well, I guess if that's happening, and it's happening correctly, how is it where we are then?
Well, it's happening, but the items that he is not able to validate are still on their list. So let's just take the cafeteria, for example. We have a warming station. He's not able to verify the warming station. And maybe that warming station died and we replaced it with another warming station. He's still got the old warming station on his list because business services and food services in this example haven't removed it.
Okay.
So I believe that many of the things, the cleanup that they're going to be doing are things that are fully depreciated, that have already been, they've spanned their useful life and they've been replaced.
Well, I think this is part of what Mr. Davenport was just getting at, was again, military example, right? Every time a commanding officer takes over, he inventories everything. He's got a list, he knows what he's supposed to have, and he goes through and he inventories it. And if things are on his list that don't exist, he corrects it. And that's at least every 2-year process. So at least every 2 years, the guy in charge, i.e. a principal in this case, right, is looking at that inventory. Because I guess what I gather from what you just said is that the contractor knows there are things he can't
Yes.
validate, but he hasn't turned around and told anybody, I can't find all this stuff, and had it removed from the list, or had, done any corrective action to determine what to do about it.
The asset list tells you that it hasn't been validated since 2023. So we know the last time he laid eyes on it and scanned it with his scanner.
Okay.
Well, the process has been, he's always given that list to the departments. Then they were supposed to go through it. We never really got the list in business services. Now we're gonna make sure we have the list and get with the department to keep up with them.
Okay. Sorry, I think we beat the dead horse a little bit. You want to have one more thing with?
So if the example you described, Karen, if an asset is no longer useful, is there a formal process for removing that from the inventory? And that's just not being followed up on.
There is a process in place, but it's not working.
It-
It hasn't been followed up on.
At
So
least it's not working all the time.
Right, right. And I think the beauty of this is we have the information. Like, he has done the legwork. It's now we just need to analyze it. And I'm making it sound simple because it's a lot of assets, I mean, there's over 1,000 that they need to look at. But once they bite the bullet and do that one piece of cleanup, I think it's gonna be great because they have the tools there, they just need to use the information. But I do think, to your point, that doing a follow-up on this, doing a full-blown audit and actually going in and checking more of the items, because this was process-driven, would be very valuable in a couple years.
And I would think doing it a couple of years from now might be more useful than doing it 1 year from now.
True, I agree.
And just so you know, we do have a policy, school board policy 3-23 on how we're supposed to dispose of assets. And I think our distribution services does a good job with that. But if no one gets with them, I don't think they know. We just gotta make sure we get all the departments together. Like if a school principal, who knows, doesn't have an item, it never makes it to distribution services to dispose of it.
Okay. Thanks for answering all those questions. I appreciate it. I got a better understanding of what I read here now. I think in summary of what we've all said here is, and the only other thing I didn't mention is the IT thing is in March. That's due at the end of March, right? We didn't get into the IT piece here, but it's in the report, obviously. I do think somewhere in the spring, I'd at least like to hear, even if it's just between me and you, that there's been some feedback on, we're getting the correct contact lists, and we're making progress towards addressing these issues. And then, as Mr. Davenport said, I think somewhere 2 years down the road, it's probably reasonable to readdress an audit, so that we can see if we've actually had some
Absolutely.
success in fixing
Sure, I'd
those
be happy
issues.
to do that.
Okay, great.
And informationally, Dan Hopkins from Business Services gave me the number of 393 for non-bus vehicles.
Okay, there you go.
So,
Good round number in your head.
Yeah. So almost 400.
All right, good, yeah.
Okay. Are we ready to move on to the next? Okay, so the next audit that you should have in your packet is the fiscal year 2025 school activity funds audit. Again, this was on the approved work plan. This audit is required by state code. All 86 schools were completed prior to the start of school. Each principal received their individual audit results, and the Department of School Leadership received the report and provided the responses. For fiscal year ending June 30, 2025, we concluded that the division's cash balances were fairly stated. There were exceptions related to certain policies and procedures that are reflected in the findings, and key internal controls examined were performing as designed, with the exception of one that required a separate investigation, and you'll note that in the report. We have a total of 7 recommendations, all of which were accepted by management. I'd like to highlight the first recommendation. It's finding number 1, as the need to improve the monitoring of account activity and account balances. We noted variances, as you can see in the text of that finding, related to money that should have been paid to the schools for rebates and commissions that were missing, unspent grant funds, negative account balances without a plan for repayment, and all of these could have been corrected with proper account monitoring. The financial statement is shown in Appendix A, noting each school's beginning cash balance, total receipts and disbursements, and the year-end bank balance. The year-end bank balance for each school matched the school's bank statements that we obtained directly from the bank. Please note that we were also able to trace the closing account balance from Bayside's 6th grade campus to the bank balance at Bayside Middle School, and confirm that all financial closeout procedures were completed for Bayside 6th grade campus. Appendix B shows the audit results by school. 45 schools did not have areas of improvement identified, while 41 did. These totals are consistent with that of the prior year and showed improvement from fiscal year 22 and 23. In closed session, we will discuss specific schools to be considered for a follow-up audit during FY26.
I'll just ask one question.
Sure.
Any schools here concerning enough to trigger a full audit?
There are 3 schools that we're going to talk about in closed session that I would like to recommend for a follow-up audit.
Okay, there you go.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Mr. Cummings?
Yep. So 3 schools had disbursements above 10,000 that were paid without contractor approval from OBS. Help me understand that bullet point a little bit more.
So schools have the delegated purchasing authority up to 10,000. So a principal can approve an expenditure up to 10. Anything above 10 requires the approval of the Office of Business Services or the Office of Procurement Services, depending on the dollar amount.
So this is just, and I know what I'm asking, but so this is just asking or saying that there's 3 purchases over 10,000 that didn't
Right,
follow that
that didn't.
process.
So a good example would be uniforms,
Okay.
or that's probably the best example I can think of is like PE uniforms, because we usually order those in bulk. So it's usually those type of large purchases. And they just forget to do that piece because they're using their checkbook at the school. So it requires extra, an extra step. Because as a reminder, each school has their own bank, each school has their own checkbook. So it's not running through the central purchase process that we have set up in our Oracle financial system. So it does take an extra step.
Okay, I was just trying to understand it a little more, because based on my experience, it's like, I didn't have the capability to exceed a purchase over that amount, so it just sounds like, yeah, with the excessive with checks, so that was interesting to me. And I mean, there's a couple of things as well that stood out to me in this one, which was, fundraising earnings that were not used, grant funds that were not used. And so, I know as like students raise money, there's, some expectation that funds are going towards the programs that they're utilizing them for, or if there's, with grants, if there's any repercussions with not using all the funds, if there's internal alert systems or something like that where, we could, I just don't know how this number was found, so I could very well be saying something that you're
Yes.
like, yeah, Matt, we already have that, that's how we
Okay,
found it.
so I'm gonna go back to my example,
Yeah.
of every school has their own checkbook.
Yeah,
And so every school has their own chart of accounts. So
Yeah.
list of activities.
mm-hmm,
The in, the balance, the in, the out, the ending balance. And so the principal has the ultimate responsibility of monitoring those account balances. On a monthly basis, the bookkeeper, who is in charge of the day-to-day activities, completes a checklist. One of the items on the checklist is confirming that all money that's supposed to be sent down here to central office has been sent. All accounts that are negative have been addressed, all transfers have been made, and all balances are correct. So the bookkeeper goes through this long list, checklist, which ultimately comes to the principal for the principal to review and sign on a monthly basis. So that's how, at the school level,
yeah,
the monitoring should occur. Is that in those, I think typically in talking to principals and bookkeepers, they meet more often than monthly, but at a minimum, they meet monthly because they're going over that packet. So that would be the point in time where that monitoring should take place. If there's a grant, these are school level grants, so the schools are administrating the use of those. And at times when we see money out there, we ask, okay, what was the allowable spend period? If the principal and bookkeeper have inherited that money from from previous administrators, they have to research it and see if it's still able to be used or if it needs to be sent back to the grantor. In speaking with Dan from Office of Business Services, because this was, my main concern, was the account monitoring. He and his team are going to hit these points in their bookkeeper trainings. And so from a day-to-day basis, that will be covered. For the principals, I am able to participate in the league meetings, and one of the things that I do is talk about common pitfalls in the audit process, and so these will be areas that I will highlight.
Okay.
But as far as being able to see it, it would have to be looking at each individual school's ledgers, which is how we find it. We look at every account at the end of the year, and we scan for problems such as these. Because typically accounts have a certain flow. For example, the picture account. At an elementary school, they're typically getting a payment in the fall, like late fall from the school pictures in the fall, and then one in the spring. So if we see only one payment coming in, then we're going to ask the question. That's just an example. And that's what the bookkeepers and principals should ultimately be doing, is when they see the account balance, if we didn't get money in, by like say December for the fall pictures, that would be a question.
Thank you so much for that insight. Those are the two things or a couple of things that just jumped out when I was reading it and just curious about learning more, so thank you.
Ms. Williams?
So Karen, since I'm new on this committee,
Yes.
is this kind of typical of previous ones? Because, on this page, there's like about 120 little notches
Yes,
that
yes.
we goofed. And
Yes.
So, but is this typical? That was my first one. And secondly, so is the problem just that people don't know the process, they haven't been trained? I mean, where's the gap here?
Okay, so as far as, is this typical? Last year, we had actually the very same split of schools that didn't have any exceptions to those that did. If we look back to 2022 and 2023, in 23, we had one more school that had problems, and in 22, we had two more schools. So we have shown improvement. Now, as far as the shuffling of, is it the same schools? That's not always the case, because they do flip around. But when you look at the top, the topics across the top, some of these are more, more concerning than others, for instance.
Right.
And so like the tick marks show how many exceptions we noted at that school. Some of them are just mistakes, because people make mistakes, and we're doing this test work on a sample basis. So I'm reporting, we have a threshold for, low dollar problems, like under $5. I'm not gonna report anything under $5, on this grid. So we do have that threshold, but I'm reporting everything that we find that's a problem because we're only doing the test work on a sample basis. Some of the things, that we note are coming from that review that I told you about, that we look at every single account at the end of the year. And that's where we came up with a lot of those account monitoring problems. So in answer to your question, I think it's pretty consistent. I do think that when we have turnover, it creates opportunities for, things to slip through the cracks. I will say that when we go out and we do a follow-up audit at a school, we're only looking at 6 months worth of transactions, and we're looking at more work because we're doing an audit all by itself. And I feel like when we do that work, those bookkeepers and principals tend to improve because I'm looking at more and doing more. But I think that's kind of human nature, so I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Mr. Davenport?
I'd like to add, pretty consistent, but not inordinate, in my opinion. We're talking about a lot of schools and literally thousands of transactions. And just things go bump in the night. Even in schools that are on their game, they sometimes have a little issue. So, and the nice thing is, we're gonna hear about some schools that we wanna do a follow-up audit on. And that's why you do this kind of thing, because you identify where there may be inordinate problems. I would guarantee you that if there were a school system the size of this one that didn't have the audit effort that this system has, if you did this kind of analysis, you would find far more issues than you're seeing here. So that's just my 2 cents worth.
Yeah, and having been on this committee as long as you have, that's good perspective. Thank you. I don't have anything to add. Go ahead.
Okay, the next report is the Healthcare Horizons report.
And just as a general reminder, I'll be recusing myself due to my work with Centera from this discussion.
So you'll have this nice thick report in your packet. This is the healthcare claims audit. This engagement was on the approved calendar 2025 work plan. The audit was conducted by Healthcare Horizons, which is a consultant that VBCPS and the City of Virginia Beach collaboratively engaged to audit the 2024 calendar year claims process by Centera Health for the city and the schools on a contingency basis. This engagement has been performed annually since calendar year 2015. The consultant is paid a percentage of the recoveries that are received. Of the $131 million healthcare claims paid for calendar 2024, Healthcare Horizons found and Centera agreed to $225,000 in errors. That's an overall error rate of 0.17%. to put that into perspective, BBCPS paid a little over $78 million in claims, and its individual errors totaled $149,000. This is an error rate of 0.19%, so it's very low. BBCPS total payments increased by $11 million in calendar year 2024 compared to 23, while errors decreased by $38,000 between 23 and 24. The chart at the bottom of page 2 shows the summary of the school's errors, which that's what I'm going to focus on, the school's errors. I'd like to highlight the top 5 monetary transactions, and I'm happy to discuss any of the others as well. So starting with ambulatory center pricing, $46,000 was paid to a provider for secondary surgical procedures, but our contract only allows for the primary surgical procedure. This is a finding that we've had year after year. So, and of course, Centera agreed to that correction. Inpatient transfer pricing. Cases where special transfer pricing was not followed for claims when a patient was transferred to another inpatient facility, as they're not entitled to bill the entire fee because they didn't finish the treatment, and that totaled just over $34,000. Duplicate claims. Duplicate claims can happen when there are different tax ID numbers or national provider ID numbers on different dates and dollar amounts, but they do have error checks for that. That was a little over $19,000. Assistant surgeon pricing, a little over $12,000. The cost of an assistant surgeon in a claim was paid at the full billed amount and should have only been billed at 20% of the allowable charge, because typically there's one surgeon who can bill at 100%, but when you have two, the typical split between that is 80-20. And then the final one is the benefits exclusion, which was gastric bypass surgery. This has been kind of an ongoing problem with our claims. We haven't had coverage for that type of procedure since 2015, although transactions have slipped through for both the city and the schools. You'll note $12,000 was paid on a non-covered benefit through several cases. You'll see in the second column there is a disputed amount of $27,000. Centera agreed that 2 charges for anesthesia and surgery for one patient should not have been paid. However, they covered the cost of the inpatient hospital stay at $27,000, which Healthcare Horizons pointed out that they shouldn't have done that, but Centera disagreed with it. So that's why it's in the disputed column. However, the Office of Consolidated Benefits is going to work with Centera to discuss this claim because it doesn't seem consistent that they agreed to, that 3 claims were done incorrectly for the same patient and they paid for the hospital stay. And I think it has to do with the way that the transaction was coded. So that will be something that that Linda Madkins and her team and Consolidated Benefits will work on. As a reminder, there has historically been no adverse impact to members through this audit. Centera covers the amount that should not have been paid. So those are the top transactions, and I'm happy to go over any other ones that you may have questions on.
No, I think that's a good way to summarize it.
Okay.
There's a lot in here. Any questions?
I don't know if you know, but what happens in a case where there might be co-insurance, 2 insurance policies, and which one is primary, which is secondary?
Yeah, that shows up on our list as dual insurance, I think it's called. Other insurance. That's $5,700. Do you see that?
Okay,
that
yes,
was-
I do see that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that does happen, because I think typically, it goes by birth date to determine who is the primary and who's the secondary. If there are 2 policies, like for a child that has mom and dad that have both coverage. And this also may happen when there's a crossover in eligibility, like as far as submitting the claims. We've processed the claim and then Consolidated Benefits gets notified that there's a secondary insurance and there's that crossover. So I think that's where it could happen, but it's a pretty low dollar amount. And I'm not sure exactly how many cases, that's footnote 7. Yeah, it says, it was just one item, item 143, so just one item.
So, sorry, anything else there? Yeah, okay. So summarizing, 149,000 was recovered based on this audit?
Well, we haven't recovered it yet, but we're going to recover it.
Okay.
So they don't bill us until we actually get the credit, because typically this doesn't come in the form of cash. It comes in the form of bill credit.
Okay.
So, again, the folks at Consolidated Benefits are amazing. They track all of these claims. And Healthcare Horizons bills us based on those recoveries, and so we validate every single one. So, for instance, that $27,000, if that moves in our favor, then it will Consolidated Benefits will make sure that comes in before we're charged for that.
Okay. So far, the 149 though, Centerra has agreed to.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
So this is a performance contract,
Yes.
and the Healthcare Horizons
Yes.
will get a piece of that.
They do.
So what we're
25%.
looking at here is the gross, not the net.
Right. Right. They get 25% of recoverable claims.
Okay, go ahead. No, don't think
And
there are any other questions.
That's finishes completed reports.
Okay. All right, to move on to item C, which is investigation number 2595.
Okay. Investigation 2595. Internal audit received a social media post for a car wash from a high school sports team with a QR Venmo code to make donations. The car wash occurred in August, but there were no deposits recorded in the school's bookkeeping software for the fundraiser. Because of prior problems with online payment platforms like Venmo, internal audit requested permission from the audit committee to investigate. We worked with employee relations and the principal to interview several staff members. We determined that the car wash was a Booster Club fundraiser. We discussed with staff members and the principal the importance of clearly distinguishing school-sponsored fundraisers from Booster Club fundraisers.
Excellent. So that sounds like a pretty good summary. So
Yes.
basically, we found out nobody in the school is doing anything they shouldn't have been
Right.
doing, other than not clearly advertising.
Yes.
All right, excellent. Anybody else have any questions on that one? Okay, now moving on to item D, work in progress.
Okay, work in progress. All audits and projects listed under work in progress are from the approved work plan or have been approved by the audit committee. You will note that the last item is our peer review that will take place in mid-October. A peer review is required every 3 years to be compliant with governmental auditing standards. This peer review will cover the period of July 1st, 2022 through June 30, 2025. The peer review is performed by the Association of Local Government Auditors. The team assigned to our review will be coming from Fairfax County Public Schools and the City of Baltimore, Maryland. Any questions on work in progress?
No, we move on.
Okay.
Item E, proposed 6-month schedule.
Yes, the 6-month audit schedule. All items reflected on the 6-month schedule mirror those from work in progress. We are actively recruiting to hire our interns for next summer. We plan to interview in December. The only other item to note is the TBDs reflected on the 6-month schedule, as these will be replaced with audits from our new work plan once approved in January.
Is investigation 2594, is that one we're going to discuss in closed?
It is,
Okay,
yes, sir.
Anybody else have any questions on the 6-month schedule? Mr. Davenport?
Have I missed something? I see nothing under Casey's.
Casey is, currently on maternity leave.
Okay, well,
Yeah,
good for
she
her.
had a baby this month.
Yeah,
So she'll be out
okay.
through the end of December.
So I did miss something.
Yes, you. So she's taking a much deserved time away. We'll miss her, but she'll be back the end of December.
See any other questions here? All right. Item F is other items, which is updates from management.
I don't have any scheduled. I don't know if there are any.
Yeah, Ms. Woodhouse isn't here today, so. Okay. All right, then that completes our open agenda items. Now we're ready to go into closed session. I will entertain a motion to read into closed.
So move.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, let's see here.
Just gonna pause for just a moment.
I gotta read it while he's recording it. All right, we have a motion to recess and approved a motion to recess into closed meeting pursuant to exceptions from open meetings allowed by section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia, 1950, as amended for the following purposes. A1, personnel matters, discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of any public body, and evaluation of performance of Department of Schools of Public or schools of public institutions of higher education, where such evaluation will necessarily involve discussion of the performance of specific individuals pursuant to section 2.2-3711, A1, namely to discuss investigation at an office and high school, investigation at an elementary school, and follow-up on certain school activity funds and audits. We're now closed. certification of a closed session.
So move.
Second.
Whereas the school board audit committee has covered a closed session on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas section 2.2-3712D of the Code of Virginia requires certification by this committee that such closed session was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore be it resolved that the school board audit committee hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, one, only the public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirement by Virginia law were discussed in the closed session to which the certification applies, and two, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered. All in favor? Aye. We have 4 ayes. Certification of closed session passes. Are there any, did you have something else you wanted to add before I ask for a motion?
Yes, I was just gonna add that, I'll be circulating, my budget proposal to the audit committee because it's required that you all take a look at that and approve it before I submit it. And it's due, the end of October. So that'll be coming. I spoke with, Mr. Culpepper and he asked that I send it to you all via email for you to take a look at and ask me any questions. I don't anticipate there being any new requests in the budget.
Okay, and the only unique thing this year versus last year's budget, for example, is the external audit.
Yeah, we'll be paying for the peer review.
Peer
this
review,
year.
sorry, thank you. Okay, I move to approve the follow-on audits as requested by the Virginia Beach School Board Auditor. All in favor?
Second.
I'm sorry, thank you, second. Now all in favor? Aye. You're approved to go forth as requested for follow-on audits.
Thank you.
And we are adjourned. Thank you.